Welcome to the Evergreen RX, your prescription for living well. Here, we're all about self-exploration, intentionality, and working with our mind, body, and soul for healing and growth. I'm your host, Hayden. I'm in my 20s and in search of connection, fulfillment, and ways to make sense of the world. If you're down, join me as I explore tools to bridge the gap between external reality and our deep inner worlds, discovering our own prescriptions for health, wholeness, and expansion. Hello, welcome back to the Evergreen RX. Today we are going to be talking about friend breakups. So I just have to, off the bat, start with the fact that I am nervous. This is probably the most close to home episode I'm doing this season, I guess. Obviously, my intention with this podcast is to always infuse my personal journey, but this topic being selected in and of itself is very closely related to my personal journey and to what I consider to be events in my life that really put me and kept me on this path of healing, of self-exploration, of growth. It's just really close, and I am definitely feeling anxious about talking about it in such a formalized way because my own experience with friend breakups and changes is just, it's personal. It was impactful to me, and so I'm nervous that I'm not gonna say everything right or exactly how I want to. I'm gonna forget something, or I'm just not going to get it all out in a 30-minute episode, which of course I'm not. I know that. I know that that's too much pressure, and no one, hopefully listening, is expecting that of me, but I think I'm just expecting it of myself because it matters so much to me. And speaking to anyone out there who might have gone through a friend breakup or is going through one and trying to navigate it, I just feel so heavy on my heart, kind of the intention or the desire to speak to you, to speak to that experience and heartache in the most comprehensive way that I can. And so I'm just feeling nervous. So I just want to put it out there to you guys and say, hey, that's where I'm coming from. Let's just promise that this will be an ongoing conversation and I don't have to get it all right, or I don't have to get it all out right now. Can you guys just promise me that you give me that leeway and that space? I think that makes me feel better. And just to make sure that anybody listening knows that this is really important to me. This topic requires me to be vulnerable, and that is something that I knew going into creating this podcast. That I was going to need to be vulnerable, that I wanted to be vulnerable, but it's not my favorite place to reside, and there's ways to be vulnerable without actually being vulnerable, and I'm really good at finding those avenues, but I did know that, I wanted to push myself with this and being open and putting things out there. I also think that that's such, that's the way to building community and to finding people that resonate, and I want that so badly. And I want that for anybody that also is looking for it. So I guess I'll just, push myself and go ahead and share. But yeah, so all of this to say, let's dive in. We'll start with personal experience. So basically, I just want to share with you guys my personal experience with the intention that maybe it makes somebody feel less alone, and also just because I think it's such an integral part about me talking on this issue. Yeah, I have training as a therapist on relationship and communication and how to navigate changes in relationships, but really I feel like so much of my opinions on this are formed through my personal experience. And I also want to spend some time talking about, why relationships change. It sucks, and we probably all would prefer not to, but talking a little bit about why that happens, and the different ways to kind of understand what's going on. And then, of course, I would like to share some skills with y'all on how I think, you can navigate and handle these, whether you're on the end of needing to change a relationship, a friendship, or you've been on the receiving end of someone changing their relationship with you, and providing a little bit of support for that. And at the end, because this is such a special little hidden topic, I've pulled a tarot card for this topic and for anybody maybe going through transition or loss in friendships, and I'll talk a little bit about that and hopefully give a little, extra support and love. Okay, so friend breakups, friend changes, friend drama, heartache, those experiences have been aplenty and very formative in my life growing up, and definitely was the first type of issue that I faced in my life that got me to go to therapy. So when I was in middle school, I had a best friend. We were the classic best friends. We loved to do everything together. We had all the same interests. We talked about guys that we liked. We had our own secret code. And when I say that, I mean legitimately secret code, that we had a notebook filled with just symbols that we came up with, writing full ass letters back and forth to each other in this code. So we were tight. And at that point in my life, all I had ever really experienced was best friendships. I had a childhood best friend, and then I met this girl in middle school, and obviously I had other friends, but I was really just a best friend girl. And then 8th grade rolls around, and without getting into too many of the nitty-gritty details, not for lack of wanting to share, but just for lack of relevance, I came to school one day, and this best friend was not talking to me, and I was clearly distressed because that was very out of character, and I kept trying to figure out what was wrong. Then lunch comes around, and she goes to the bathroom, so I get up to follow her to the bathroom and say, hey, what is going on? Long story short, she basically says, we can't be friends anymore, we can never talk again, goodbye, and leaves. And I can still see myself in that moment, in that middle school bathroom, just crushed, heart shattered. I just was crushed. I just did not understand what had just happened. This was my best friend. She was everything, and all of a sudden just nothing. And I think it was so wounding in particular because I didn't know that could happen. I didn't know people did that. I didn't even really understand what heartbreak was. Yeah, I listened to Taylor Swift and sang along to The Way I Loved You, but I did not understand what it meant. And I definitely did not understand it could happen with friends for no apparent reason. And even as I'm talking about this now, I'm pausing in pauses that I inevitably will edit out, where I'm questioning the relevance of sharing this, why anybody would listening would care, what it even matters. But I think it's important because this moment, as strange as it may sound, was so formative in putting me on the path of healing and of realizing how much connection means to me and to all of us, how much our social relationships impact us, and the beliefs that can be instilled based on good or bad relationships with others. And it was just in that one moment, everything changed. And honestly, I have, this person to thank in some ways, because I really do believe that experience was a very influential one on me ending up pursuing counseling and becoming a therapist. And it's funny because I also talk about this knowing that this person now, way later, many years later, came back, reached out to me, apologized. I mean, in a very honest and heartfelt way. And like we're kind of chilling now. We're kind of just like good with each other. And I know this person follows me on this account and might listen to this. If she hears this, then hi, cool. You know who you are. And now you're hearing a little bit more about the impact. But that's fine. But yeah, this experience was just so formative and also makes me such a strong advocate in saying that like friend breakups hurt. They hurt so bad. And I spent a lot of time undermining this experience and having it undermined by other people that ever knew about it, because it was like, oh, it's just a friend. It's like, wouldn't make more. It's not, it wasn't romantic. It's like, it doesn't hurt the same, but it can, and it does. We share our lives with people in whatever capacity it may be, and all of those relationships matter. Maybe me talking about this makes somebody feel less alone in their experience, but I think it's also just important to know. And if I'm creating this community to share our lives and our healing journeys together, then I guess I have to share that. So that happened. That was, formative. That point forward, continued making new friendships. I had friend groups in high school that like fell apart in front of my eyes. That hurt. Was also a little bit triggering to my, wounding around friends, and that hurt. That was really hard, and just having the experience put back in my face again that friendships don't always last forever, and sometimes you really don't get to control how they end or why they end. And that was very hard for me to learn. And now here we are, and I'm in my 20s, and I'm working through, I've healed some shit, I'm like doing better, and I've gotten to a point of like, oh, friendships don't always last, they don't always stay the same, and sometimes that's something that I choose, that I want for my own life. And what does that look like? Because now I'm like, I don't want to hurt anybody like I've been hurt. But like, what does that even look like? Nobody taught me. I mean, all I had ever experienced was that friend breakups sucked, hurt, came out of the blue, and I couldn't have any control over them. And now as an adult, it's like, oh, friend breakups or friend transitions don't have to be like that. But what does that even look like? That's kind of what I want to help with here, and why I said navigating them, because I'm at a point in my life where I am navigating friend changes, and I've been just trying to figure out what that means. And so I thought maybe I could share something with you, maybe just still some of my hours spent in therapy and in therapy classes, and distill them down into something that you can use in your own life, because relationships are complicated. We're always negotiating boundaries. We're always negotiating what works and what doesn't. And it's a challenge. And I think it's something that we could all talk more about. So I listed out a few places where I think friend breakups kind of come from. One of the biggest ones being the myth that friends don't fight. And this is pervasive and harmful in the sense that leads to a lack of communication between friends. And then you're going through all these life transitions, you're growing up with someone, and you're not communicating. Resentment builds, anger builds, needs aren't being met. And sometimes, as we're talking about, all anyone ever has learned or knows what to do is to just cut it off, just end it. And that's awkward, or you don't want to hurt the other person, and so maybe you don't ever talk about it, and it just kind of fades away, or you ghost the person, and it's like hurtful on both sides, and it can be hard to process and to move on without any closure. Another thing is just lifestyle or situational changes. Maybe you met someone in school and you no longer go to school together, or you had a friend that was like your party friend in college and you no longer really go out and drink, so you don't have anything in common anymore. Another thing is, it can be a side effect of changing, of growing, a side effect of therapy. I talked about this in a past episode that, a risk, quote unquote, of therapy is that you change and that sometimes your relationships change with you and sometimes they're not able to. And that can mean the need for changes in your friendship. Maybe you also start to notice more toxic patterns or things you don't like in friends that you used to think that you got along with. The last thing I wrote down was that friendship breakups, endings are a part of life, unfortunately. And I tried for a long time to not acknowledge that. I tried to protect myself from the pain and the inevitability that not every relationship is meant to last forever. Not every relationship is also going to end in the dramatic and heartbreaking way of my middle school best friend. But they don't all get to last forever, and that sucks. And in turn, I think for a while I ended up isolating myself. Maybe not so much physically or socially from people. I would still interact with people. I still had friends. But I think on an emotional level, and this is still something I'm working through, on really letting people in, letting people get to know me, letting people really see me. I didn't do that for a really long time because I thought maybe it would hurt less if the relationship ended. And I know now that that's not true. And all it does is it just keeps you in a box for however long the relationship does last. And so, you never are able to experience the fulfillment, the connection, or the joy that can come from having really intimate and meaningful relationships with people. So, like I said earlier, I'm really hoping talking about this, starting a conversation in this community about friendships can do is just really make people feel less alone, and maybe the pain that's been caused by friendships and feeling like, oh, I should just get over this, or like it doesn't really matter, or just in noticing your relationships changing. I think a lot of my audience is aimed at people in their 20s and 30s, and that's a huge transition time. So probably all of us are going to face this more than once. And I also know that so many people now, especially at this age, are looking for friends. I'm looking for friends. I am trying to find people that really connect and resonate with me and who I am today. And I just want to come out and say that. And I've, met other people. I started a book club and I met a bunch of girls that are also like, I'm looking for friends and I don't know how to do this. And I don't, all of a sudden I looked around and I felt like I didn't have as much of a community anymore, or I'm not connected as much with the people that I used to be. And that can be really confusing and scary. And I also want to let everybody know that it's okay to set boundaries and it's okay to change friendships. So how do you navigate friend breakups? I separated this into two parts. One, if it's your choice, and one, if it's not your choice. It just happens to you. So we'll start with your choice. So maybe you've identified a friendship that's no longer really serving you and you want to renegotiate the relationship with that person, or maybe you don't want to be a part of it anymore. My first recommendation would be to think over your typical rules of relationships in general. So what I mean by that is kind of what you expect from relationships. What are your needs and wants? What are your non-negotiables? If somebody does a certain behavior that you're not okay with, what is that? Do you know? Have you articulated? I think a good example is in the dating world, people are a little bit more, I think, apt to think of their non-negotiables. I've heard a lot of people say, if if somebody I'm dating is rude to a waiter and doesn't tip, that is just a no-go. I just will not continue to see them. But we don't think about that as much with friends. So really laying out what it is that you need and want in a relationship, and then considering your pyramid of friendships. Another shout out to my therapist, Barb. She's been talking to me about the pyramid for so long. And basically, it's just that not every relationship is on the same level of intimacy. I think this is something that our generation is like a little bit skewed on. I don't know why. I don't know if it's the way that the internet gets us all connected, or, you can be in constant communication with people that you don't even really see that much. Relationships like have levels. You might have your coworkers, you may be like neighbors, you have your best friend, you've got acquaintances, you've got good friends, you've got whatever. They're at all different levels of closeness, and not everybody can belong up at that little top triangle of the pyramid. And sometimes people shift up and down on levels. So if you imagine the bottom of a pyramid, that the widest part, that could include like your neighbor, like the person you see walking their dog every other week when you're out in your yard or something, like, that's pretty neutral friendships. And then as you go up the levels and you're getting into more and more narrow groups that maybe have less people in them, that could be like school friends, coworkers. The next level up could be like the cousin you're really close to and like your high school best friend. And the level above that is like your ride or dies right now. And people might move along that spectrum. And sometimes people can even move from the very top to pretty close to the bottom. And that takes some finesse. That takes, I think, a little bit of skill to move relationships from the top to the bottom. But I am going to talk a little bit about, maybe some tips on how to do that. But just really understanding that pyramid, and maybe just thinking about people in your life and where they are in the pyramid versus where you might like them to be. You might even find yourself asking if this person has a spot on the pyramid any longer. So now that you kind of laid it out, and maybe you're thinking of a specific person that you want to change your relationship with, maybe there's a need that you would like them to be meeting that they're not, or a certain standard of relationship for the part of the pyramid that they're in. A good question to ask yourself is, are they willing and able to meet blank need? From everything you know about this person, maybe from conversations that you've had with them, are they willing and able to meet the need that you're wanting them to? Not everybody is going to be able to do this. And then you can decide whether or not you're okay with that. Then you decide what capacity they have in your life. So maybe the frequency you see them, or how close you are. Maybe the types of things that you talk to them about. You might have a friend from school and you are fine having them in your life, but you're going to keep it more towards, school, or just catching up on, how their family is doing or how work is going. And you see them for a 30-minute lunch every month instead of seeing them for dinner every other week. I think the more that we're able to infuse our relationships with the flexibility and kind of creativity of what all of the different levels look like, the more we're able to navigate, I think, maintaining relationships with people in a way that feels good, and avoiding that lack of communication, lack of knowing what's wrong, building up resentment, and then just having to end it, or being stuck in a relationship that doesn't work for you for a really long time. I think we're able to more fluidly navigate all of these when we have more of an understanding of our needs and wants and who is meeting them, and where they kind of belong in our pyramid of relationships. So if you've gotten to this point and it feels safe to do so, I'm saying safe because there's an exclusion with some relationships that feel they're toxic, or this person has been super harmful to you, or they're very degrading to you. You've tried to communicate in the past and it doesn't work. Those are exceptions, and I don't want you to put yourself in, an unsafe or potentially harmful situation. But if you feel like you can communicate, and there's a couple of skills or techniques that I offer to maybe help. So I had a professor in grad school, Meredith McNeil, and she came up with this acronym, OMEN. It's the OMEN tool for communication, and you can use this in so many situations. But basically what it is it's observation, meaning, emotion, and need. So talking about what you observe, talking about the meaning you're making from it, maybe the story that you're making out of it, then talking about how it makes you feel, and then what you need to see different. So maybe there's a friend that you have and you have a pretty good relationship, but she never seems to be very happy for your successes. And she tends to say a negative comment or kind of brush them off. And that bothers you. You could say, what you've noticed, which is, I've noticed when something good happens in my life that I'm really excited about, I don't feel that same level of excitement back from you. And sometimes I feel even like you are negative towards my success. The story I'm making of that, or the meaning I'm making of that, is that you're not happy for me when good things happen and you don't want to see me succeed. That makes me feel emotion, hurt, and sad. I find myself not sharing things with you that I normally would like to. Last, need. In this friendship, I really want to be able to share my successes with you, and I'd like to see you be happy for me in return. So that's an example of the OMEN tool. Another classic communication tool is from DBT, which is a therapy modality created by Marsha Linehan, and it's the Dear Man tool. It's a longer acronym. I'm not going to go through all of it, but it's similar to the OMEN tool, but it, has some parts about like appearing confident. So there's a little bit more to the Dear Man tool, and there's a lot of examples online with that one. So I will definitely link that below. But those are just some helpful tools to hopefully be able to express your needs or your wants in that relationship and what you've identified in a healthy way. And something to keep in mind when you do this: everyone is entitled to their own response to your boundary or to whatever you communicate with them. We don't get to decide how people respond, and we don't get to decide what they do for themselves. Maybe they're going to meet your need, and that's awesome, and you've really built another strong layer of trust and communication in that relationship, but maybe they won't. Maybe they decide that that's not something they can do or something that they want to do, and that is okay. They are allowed to have that response. Our job is to just work with what that brings up in us when they do. And maybe you really wanted something from a friendship, and you wanted this friend to be able to meet this new shifting need, or to be able to be in the level of pyramid that you wanted. And it's disappointing when that doesn't happen. But that's another level of something to just work through and to address, because stuff like this is never as clear cut as we wish it would be. And I just say this as a good reminder on: be proud of yourself for communicating, for being upfront, for using your healthy tools. Don't let the other person's response dictate your behavior. And understand that we can only have so much control in relationships. They're a two-way street. That person might also have feedback for you that hopefully then you can take in and decide what you want to do with it. If you're really applying this and you're really curious, always just send me a DM if something comes up and we'll talk. And, I just think I'm trying to lay things out that are helpful, but I just know stuff like this is so complicated. And I can't possibly put it all into one short podcast. So for all of my sweeties out there that are maybe going through a friend breakup that was not their choice and maybe was not navigated with the most, tact or communication, maybe you're left with some questions, you're left with some hurt or lack of closure. My first bit of guidance would be to be gentle with yourself. Let yourself have your feelings about it. And know that it's valid. It's like what I said at the beginning. Friendship breakups hurt really bad. And while not many people are really writing songs about it, it can be similar pains. We love people that we bring into our lives. We let them into our lives. We let them see us and get to know us. And when it feels like there was a rejection to that vulnerability, it can be really, really painful. And you can take what you need to be able to process it. I think if it's safe, if it feels like a relationship where it's possible to ask questions or to reach out for some closure, I encourage you to do that. In some of the relationships that I've had into my life, I wish I would have been a little more active on asking for closure or for asking questions. We're all just trying our best, and especially growing up as a teen girl, dealing with other teen girls that didn't know or didn't have the most skills. communication was not always there. And I just would take it and kind of move forward and just think, take the high road, leave it in the past. But I do wish that I would have reached out to some of those friends that it felt safe with to say, hey, what is going on here? Did I do something? What changed? Or to just say how I was feeling, because that also was important. And I think sometimes I just went off of the other person's word too much. It doesn't feel safe to get that closure with that person, or maybe you just want to do things a little different. I think journaling about, your feelings, and you can even write a letter and burn it over a fire or send it up in a balloon, whatever helps to feel like you get a little bit of closure on that relationship. I also think reaching out for support, reaching out for the people in your life who you do have really strong relationships with, this can help combat maybe some of the fears you have around why somebody would no longer choose to be in your life and what that means about you and your value and your lovability. I think you can also reach out for help in that. I don't know what I would do without my therapist and my support over the years, helping me kind of unwind beliefs that got instilled so quickly after being rejected by someone without much explanation and without really understanding and having a lot of thoughts on what did I do? What's wrong with me? Is anybody ever going to want to be friends with me? Is anybody going to like me again? This can also help with maybe reducing some of those protective parts that want to just jump in and isolate you and keep you from building relationships again and try to, stave off feeling heartache like that. Also, if you do get feedback from a friend, if someone does communicate with you things that they didn't like in your relationship or maybe that they wanted to see different, it can help with processing that feedback, taking it in, seeing what resonates with you. Maybe somebody gave you some really helpful information about how you are in relationships that does point to an area of growth, and kind of helping have someone parse through that with you and knowing what's yours to take and what's yours to leave with that other person, so that you don't just dismiss responsibility in the feedback we get in relationships, but you also don't take too much on. My last little thing to those who might be hurting from losing a friendship is just, like I've been saying, knowing that this happens. You're not alone in this. It doesn't mean you're a terrible person. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have friends again, or that friendship that you did have, it doesn't mean that it was all bad. I feel like now, and even before my middle school best friend reached out, I was able to get to a point of taking the good of that relationship, and appreciating it for what it was, even though it ended in a way that I never wanted. Okay, so I'm hoping I got some of my points across, and maybe providing some support for any of you going through this, and just connecting through this asynchronous format, me to you. I really hope that you felt some of my heart through this. This is so close to me, and like I said, I will be talking about friendships more in the future, other aspects of it. Connection is just huge for me. I'm getting super into astrology, and my God, my birth chart is riddled with the importance of connection and friendship. I mean, it is just like I came on this planet for that in some degree, and so I want to keep the conversation going. And before we finish up, we've got the dose, and the dose is super fun today. Like I said, I pulled a tarot card for anybody that is going through a friendship loss or transition and needing a little support. I pulled Temperance, which if you're watching the video version, here's my tiny little tarot card. Temperance is one of my favorite cards, actually, and traditionally it really symbolizes divine support, kind of that connection between us and a higher power, whatever that may be, and feeling that support. It's almost like we're doing our work in our life. We're trying to make good decisions. We're pursuing our dreams. We're, making choices. And then that other 50% that is, being supported by sources outside of ourselves for, our highest and greatest good. But when I saw this and how I felt it related to this topic is the image on this particular deck of the woman or the angel pouring water into a cup. And I really got a strong sense of that representing the need for us to pour into our own cups and to be our own best friend. I think that relationship that we have with ourselves, when it's strong and robust, it helps us weather the changes that we go through in relationships throughout our lives. I pulled a card from a different deck for myself, just recording this, because I was nervous and because it matters a lot to me. I wanted support. And the card that I pulled, the word for it is sanctuary. And basically it was all about creating that sanctuary, that safe space, that home within ourselves that we can always return to and feel safe in no matter what is happening in our world. And I just feel like that card and temperance are both just showing me and offering to any of you who need it that reminder of returning to that home within ourselves. Being there for whatever you need, caring for yourself, and knowing that you are intrinsically worthy, you are intrinsically lovable. And sometimes that can be really hard to hear or hard to believe. But in times like this, in times of transition or loss, returning to that home and supporting yourself, pouring into your own cup. So that's my challenge for you this week. How can you pour into your own cup? How can you be there for yourself and be your own best friend, as cheesy as that may sound? Because I think that really empowers us in going out and having these conversations with people in our life that might be hard or uncomfortable. And it also empowers us when going out and making new friendships and showing up and being vulnerable and being authentic. And the more we do that, the more we will be met by that authenticity by other people. And then we are surrounded by strong, beautiful, flourishing relationships, which, if you're anything like me, which I think you might be if you're listening, that's our bread and butter. That's what we want. Beautiful, nurturing relationships. And it's out there for you. Well, thank you so much for listening. As always, reach out to me, send me an email, send me a DM if you have any questions, if you just want to talk, if you want to connect. I'm there. I also will have those 2 tools that I listed in the description of this episode. And I will catch you in the next one. Bye.